We turn this week to the nature factor. It holds that we can discover the benchmark for living as a useful member of humankind by focusing on our biological species, Homo sapiens. Can we find within our common Homo sapiens nature itself some absolute standard that would show us the way? A popular form of this factor notes the astounding fact that the complex, self-aware, feeling and reasoning creatures that we are today have evolved over the ages from rudimentary single-cell creatures. If evolution can do this, then it makes sense to consider whether evolution also holds the key to how to live as a useful member of humankind. Evolutionary ethics is the view that it does solve this problem, and evolutionary ethics is our big idea for week 4. This view rode in on the coattails of Darwinian evolution some 150 years ago. Science has convincingly shown that human traits such as cooperation, altruism, and sympathy are products of biological evolution. So perhaps to be more ethical is to be more evolved. Perhaps we do not even need philosophy anymore, since we have arrived at a point where science can show us the way. This would be a wonderful result. Perhaps too wonderful to be true. Let's look at it more carefully. An easy way of thinking about Darwinian evolution is to identify 3 simple ingredients. One ingredient is random variation. There are small differences in the offspring of every living thing. A new plant or animal may be a bit smaller or larger, faster or slower, stronger or weaker, darker or lighter than its ancestors. A second ingredient is survival of the fittest. Usually the random variations are inconsequential or harmful, but on rare occasions they're helpful. The slightly faster rabbit is a bit more likely to escape the fox, and so fitter for survival, and so more likely to have offspring of its own. The third ingredient is heritability. That is, the trait can be inherited. It can be passed along to the next generation. Without heritability, the faster rabbit is no good to anybody but itself. But there's a mechanism, namely genes, whereby the speed can be passed on to the bunnies to be, meaning that they too will be more likely to survive and reproduce than the slower ones. So the speed, random though the variation might have been, can eventually benefit the entire species. That's evolution in a nutshell. Evolutionary ethics simply claims that these 3 are at the same time also the ingredients of morality. Stir them together, bake for a few million years, and serve when cooled. Can this recipe possibly provide us with a morally nutritious meal? Random variation certainly has nothing to offer morality. If I lived my life, say, from one haphazardly selected fortune cookie to the next, it might make for a funny film, but that is no path towards benefiting humankind. The same is true of heritability. If my curly hair is inherited and yours is a perm, does anyone think that makes mine morally preferable? So these 2 ingredients are the moral equivalents of yeast and salt. They have their uses, but they're nutritionally empty. But the third ingredient, survival of the fittest, looks more promising. It's all about our continued existence and reproduction, which are surely a benefit to humankind. So let's focus on traits that promote human survival and reproduction. Call them evolutionary excellences. Greater speed might be an evolutionary excellence. Curly hair, maybe not. If evolutionary ethics is correct, then evolutionary excellences will turn out to be the same as moral excellences, traits that enable us to live as useful members of humankind, which we also call moral virtues. The good news for the theory is that traits such as altruism, cooperation, and sympathy can be very helpful for survival and reproduction, and so can indeed be both evolutionary and moral excellences. But for the theory to work as a final factor, every evolutionary excellence must also be a moral excellence. What about our natural tendencies towards rivalry, greed, cold-heartedness, and violence. They can also be enormously helpful in surviving and reproducing, but they can also cause immeasurable harm to humankind. So evolutionary ethicists have something akin to the problem Euthyphro has with the gods. Either we bite the bullet and accept that every evolutionary excellence is ethically excellent, giving us an incoherent grab bag of traits counting as morality, or we have to appeal to some other final factor to help us sort out the morally good evolutionary traits from the evil ones. In short, evolution can give us deep insight into what is, but it cannot help us get an ought from that is. So it cannot solve morality. This does not mean that the findings of science are useless to how we go about living our lives. Quite the opposite. It merely means being morally evolved is more than a matter of being biologically involved. And that is the big idea for week 4.